What's up, Devy peoples? It's EK back with another episode of the Devy Dose. Kyle and I are back at it again. We're gonna start hitting the big board hard as we get into the middays of the summer here and try to get our conference previews wrapped up, get you everything you need for the rest of your supplemental drafts and for your CFF drafts. So I'm fired up. Today we're doing the Pac-12. Kyle, how you doing, man?
I'm excited. There's not much time left until we get to football season, so let's knock out a big one here with the Pac-12. Plenty of talent, plenty of points going up in this league, especially through the air. Should be fun to talk about.
Yeah, I think our dilemma's changed a little bit as we get into the P5, and the earlier ones is kind of like scraping through the G5 guys, trying to find just a shred of Devy talent, obviously tons of CFF talent, and now we're kind of on the other end of it, where it's just like Devy talent galore in these conferences, guys you want for CFF, and it's more like it's an embarrassment of riches, right? That we have to like sift through and try to make it comprehensible to you sitting on the other side of the camera here. So we're gonna fire right into it. We're gonna go by school this time. We think that might be a little better workflow instead of just firing off like 20, 30 wide receivers to you at a time. So trying to make this a little more palatable, a little more entertaining. Although Kyle and I bickering, always fun.
Yeah, that's what I'm here for.
It's here for your sharp wit and your sparkling personality, my friend. So my first school was Utah. Right, we're going to look at Utah. Yeah, right. Utah has a lot of returning talent. Obviously, the big departure is Dalton Kincaid at tight end. A little bit of other fluctuation, but really he's the guy I care about for fantasy football. It's not around. Quarterback.
Damien Thomas is done as well.
Yeah, it wasn't really useful.
Wasn't useful last year, but
yeah,
if you're still living in 2021. Damien Thomas is no longer a Ute.
I'm sure some people got burned on him in 2020, 21 fantasy drafts because he was going, 4th, 5th round. He's going pretty high. So returning, obviously, Cam Rising. Cam Rising was a useful CFF quarterback, 22.75 points per game. Probably a late draft pick in the NFL, right? I see him going in the range of the Stetson Bennett's of the world. I mean, he's a kid that can play some football, but you think Stetson Bennett's somehow better than Cam Rising?
I love Cam Rising.
Yeah, but he's still not like a day 1 or day 2 guy.
I think he can be.
Okay, that's fair. I mean, he definitely has like the mobility. He has playmaking ability.
He's like Zach Wilson-esque in the way that like some of the like factors are there and obvious now, and when we look back next year, we might be like, oh, why did we not see this?
I just feel like Zach Wilson made the world fall in love with him because of the arm talent, because of just the cannon, the off-platform stuff. It really made some throws in high-profile games. I feel like Cam Rising's had plenty of exposure on the national stage, and I just don't think he's impressed with the arm that much. That's where
nobody stays up for Utah games. Other than that Florida game that he choked, but
yeah, all right. I mean, they won freaking championships, the Pac-12 this year, right? Like, plenty of people watched that. Plenty of people watched that because people thought that the Frogs were going to be. Yeah, Caleb. Yeah, and then too, I think people were watching because TCU and the champion, in the playoffs and so on and so forth. So, a couple people I care a lot about in the supplementals from Utah. First one, and this isn't, if you've done a few supplementals, this name, Shaquindon Jackson, and he went off towards the end of the year last year. Jackson was recruited as a quarterback, not at Utah either. Where was his first stop? It was SEC or something. Transferred to Utah, backed up Rising, I think at the beginning of last year and in the spring, and then got converted to a running back during the season last year. Didn't really play the position until the back half of the season, but had over 80 yards in 4 of his last 6 games, ran for 6.8 a clip. Didn't catch balls last year, but they did throw to him in the spring game, which is really exciting. I mean, this kid's 6'2", 230. If he can put it together, like, he is an NFL guy for sure.
It was Texas. You're a year early on the SEC call.
Yeah, right. I wanted to say Texas first, and then I was like, did they have Rashawn Johnson do the same thing? But apparently that's how you go to the NFL as a running back now. You recruited to Texas as a quarterback. You get anything
So,
on
so when is Malik Murphy switching?
I next year probably.
Yeah, I like Jaquindon a lot. I mean, that size is interesting, like Derrick Henry-esque,
Yeah.
Not many running backs make it at 6'2", but if you're like that huge in terms of, muscle mass, you can make it work. Wow.
I mean,
that's a call.
What, over Jonty and Frank Gore? Like, I think those guys barely make the league. I think Jackson can be around 3. Mm-hmm. Would you put him behind Gore?
No, I'd only put him behind GT.
The thing is, Jonty's played a little bit at a G5 level. So, yeah, we think he's got the talent, but it's a step up from G5 to Pac-12. I mean, it's not the strongest P5 conference, but Jaquindon's done more against better defenses right now, to me. I don't think he stays there very long. I think we'll probably bump him down in a couple of minutes.
Okay. I have GT 7 spots above in mine, personal.
Okay. Well, sell me on it. Why is Ginty should go ahead of Jaquindon Jackson? Ginty couldn't get recruited to the P5.
Bull. First of all.
He got some offers, right?
Yes. Like 6'2" at a running back. Like, how many running backs in the NFL are 6'2"? Like one.
Yeah,
Derrick Henry.
Derrick Henry. I feel like Connor's a little bit tall. God, isn't Sharp?
And is he Derrick Henry?
I don't know, but he could be. I think he's pretty fast. So, all right. To make you happy, we will put him behind Junty for now until after the show, at which point I'll put him above him. All right. I don't want to spend too much time on Jaquindon. I love him. He goes in the 3rd round supplementals. I take him there pretty much every time if I can. If Benson's gone, he's pretty much my next vet running back that I'm hitting. Are you trying to target him in supplementals, Kyle, or no?
Yeah, but I never actually get him.
Yeah.
I try to wait till the end of the 3rd, and it just never happens.
Yeah. Really, rarely have I seen him fall past that, at least not when I had picks. I think the other guy that's worth talking about running back here, I mean, there's like 2 names there. There's the kid that they made play safety last year that got torched by JSN or 2 years ago. He's an athlete, but I don't think he's like any real talent at running back. He's not even the direct backup. He's their satellite guy. I'm not going to think too much about him. Jalen Glover, I think, is probably the guy that takes the role over next year unless they bring in some crazy transfers. So I think he's a guy that's on waivers that maybe you look at picking up later in the season with that, thinking about 2024 in mind. So a couple of the guys to talk about Utah. I guess I just want to go in order of position. So wide receiver, they've traditionally had nothing. There's this kid that's a true freshman, came in as a 3-star, Mikey Matthews, and got a ton of hype in the spring game. 7 for 59, but not just that, just like other mentions of beats from him, like throughout the spring. 5'10", 185. I think he's a slot guy. He could be, a smaller, like a Z or something. But I don't know. It's worth noting, right, if he does break out there. Obviously, they lose a ton of production from Kincaid. Yes, Brent Kuthi, who we'll talk about next, will fill most of that, but there's room for someone else there, I think, if they decide to throw it a little more. The other guy it's worth talking about, but not much to me, is Micah Pittman, who is their highest profile transfer in the portal. He was a 4-star guy at Florida State, was in the rotation there always, never really, seized the wide receiver 1 role there. So I don't expect him to be anything to write about here, but, maybe be aware. Maybe he does go off. Maybe he takes a step and, does something. Brant Kuthi, 16.77 points a game in a committee with Kincaid. The year before, he was even better before Kincaid really had his ascent. I mean, he's a top 5 tight end in CFF. He's an NFL guy, although he is more of a tweener. So I don't know if he goes like round 1, round 2. He could be a little bit later, but certainly a guy that's capable of producing at the next level. And I also think it's worth talking about Thomas Yasmin, who's the next guy up at the position. And Utah is going to use 2 tight ends. This might be a guy that you can snag late if you need someone for a little bit of production in your CTC, in your CFF. Might be a guy to keep an eye on, particularly if Kuthi gets nicked up, which he often has. Yasmin could be in for a really big workload. Where are you at on these guys, Kyle? Anything to add here? Kuthi's our tight end 1, right?
Yeah. I think the wide receiver you're missing is Devon Vele, Vele. I assume that's pronounced Vele.
He's returning, right?
Yeah, returning. Last year, he was second on the team in receptions and receiving yards with 55 for 695 and 5 touchdowns. I think he'll be the one. He's a former walk-on, but he's like a 4th or 5th year senior now, so he's been around the program. He's proved his worth. They'll likely trust him going into this year, and he'll probably won't be incredibly CFF relevant, but like a bye-week fill-in maybe.
So, all right, what do you do with him? He's not a Devy guy. What do you do with him in CFF? I mean, he's like at the bottom of this, right? Like Shropshire, obviously I'd prefer. Jalen, like he goes in like the Cyrus Allen lane below that, right? I'd rather have Cyrus Allen.
Yeah.
But after that, it's kind of like a lot of whatever, like a lot of just like dart throws. So I can see him going anywhere in there.
He's like 6'5", 210, so you could talk yourself into him being the next Kincaid.
It could happen, right?
But is Kincaid's point total worth it at wide receiver rather than tight end?
Yeah, dude, he was like, well, I guess even without the premium, he's probably a 10, 12 point a game player. But I don't know. How do you spell the guy's name? You want to put him in here whenever you get a minute? I'm not really worried about it. I think Yasmin goes in the middle here and our CFF tight ends. Just because if anything does happen to
more of a CFF dynasty play than a CFF redraft play.
Yeah. Although, I mean, you're not drafting him high, but if you need a tight end and you're in C2C and there's no one out there, he might be a guy to get. So the Mikey kid is a little bit interesting to me, but he's probably not a big CFF guy. He's probably more of a C2C guy at this point. I'm not ready.
Also, like a more of a dynasty guy than a redraft guy.
Yeah.
I mean, you just can't expect a ton from a freshman.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm putting him like below most of the like CFF only guys in Devy, I think. Jordan Hudson, maybe put him above that. This isn't a guy that gets drafted in supplementals. I mean, I think that I'm the only guy on the planet that's paying any attention to him that lives outside of Utah. All right, where does Rising go for CFF? Did you stick him in somewhere?
No, I put him at 1 at Devy, but
yeah, that's fine. I'd put him in the Basilak range. Maybe
I'd go higher than that. Was he not like a top 15 option last year?
It's 22 points a game, so I don't know what that translates into. Less than Preston Stone, I would guess. Maybe above Casey Thompson. Above Preston Stone?
He's safer than Preston Stone.
Yeah, I mean, the SMU system just is gold, though. Yeah, throw him in there. Throw him above Preston Stone. I can't get higher than that, can you?
You can put him ahead of McCall with Chadwell gone.
Yeah. Isn't that like the same system, though? I thought it was one of Chadwell's assistants that took over.
But is it the same?
We'll find out. I think that's a tier. You know what I mean? If we were gonna tier this out, I think I'm comfortable with the Cordiero, McCall, Preston Stone, and I think Casey Thompson would be the beginning of the next tier after that. So, all right. Anything else on Utah? Jalen Glover, I don't think we need to really rank right now. That's a later name. Oh, Jaquindon for CFF.
Oh
Pretty
yeah,
good.
probably.
Pretty good.
Yeah, probably like
Okay, Thomas.
18, 19. Yeah.
What? Oh,
No,
overall,
points
you're
per
saying?
game. Points per game.
Oh, yeah. I could see Jalen White outperforming him, but I could
Yeah.
also see him outperforming Jalen White. But I think that's a good range for him. I could be talking to putting him 3 spots higher or 3 spots lower. Like Marquise Crosby is just staring at me there. I'm like, I think he's going to be close to a 20-point per game player. Yeah, all right, I can live with that. What do you got? What's your first team?
Washington, I believe. No, Oregon. Oregon is my first team. Same thing as Washington, basically. Because Oregon returns their starting quarterback in Bo Nix, who just went for 294 completions on 409 attempts for 3,600 yards with 29 touchdowns on just 7 interceptions. One of the better quarterbacks in the country, even with his, poor performance in the past in the SEC. He's found a home in Oregon with gosh, the dude's name is escaping me.
Oh,
The former Georgia OC, whatever, DC, Dan Lanning. Bo Nix, definitely one of the better quarterbacks for CFF and for Devy in the country. And then in the running back room, they return both their star running backs in Bucky Irving and Noah Whittington. Irving more of the 1A to Whittington's 1B. Irving had 1,058 rushing yards last year with 5 touchdowns, added 30 receptions, 300 receiving yards, and 3 receiving touchdowns. Meanwhile, Whittington with 780 rushing yards, 5 touchdowns, 20 receptions, and a receiving touchdown. Definitely a 1A, 1B situation there, but both of them are pretty useful in CFF leagues, I would think. Irving, probably almost a weekly starter. Whittington, that bye-week fill-in type guy. Interesting to see what our take is on them and Devy, as, they're both pretty small backs. Could be hard for them to succeed in the NFL. And then also in that running back room is rising sophomore Jordan James, a high 4-star last year, highly touted recruit. Last season, as a true freshman, he had 46 attempts and 5 touchdowns. So they used him on the goal line. He is definitely the biggest back in the room. Could once again be that pounder role and could maybe see some more attempts going into his second season, which would just make this running back room even more annoying for CFF.
And they got a good freshman, too.
They got a couple good freshmen. Dante Dowdell is a high 4-star who was committed to Ole Miss earlier in the cycle, ends up at Oregon, and then Jaden Lemar also ends up at Oregon. Both guys 4 stars. Not really huge names in the C2C community, but 24/7 liked them both, so could be some interesting additions there. And then moving on to the what's that?
Some hype. Some people like Dowdell. I mean, he's a workhorse size guy. He was great in high school. So.
Yeah, that's true. And then the wide receiver room, the big name to know is Troy Franklin. I believe he's a rising junior now. Just broke out last season with 61 receptions, 891 yards, and 9 touchdowns. He is pretty much expected to be the wide receiver 1 and probably will be. And then they decided to kind of rebuild the rest of that room via the transfer portal. They added Gary Bryant Jr. from USC, which is the least interesting of the 3 names I'm about to say. And then they added Tez Johnson from Troy, who's a kind of a small-statured 5'8", I think, wide receiver, but was incredibly productive at Troy, had some huge games for them, and will probably slot into that slot role at Oregon. And then they also added Trayshawn Holden from Alabama, who will seems to be the likely starter across from Franklin. So you're looking at Franklin, Holden, and Johnson starting for those 3, catching passes from Bo Nix. And then at the tight end position, Terrence Ferguson ended the season last year with 32 receptions, 400 yards, and 5 touchdowns. Nothing to scoff at, but not a huge role for the tight end in this offense.
Yeah, I love it. I think these guys are going to be pretty interesting to rank. I kind of threw them into where I would put them as you were talking. I mean, I think Bo Nix is the Devy QB1 so far. I mean, I guess we could argue Irving Nix. I would be a Nix guy over that just because I think he's done more and kind of, just the rushing upside with him. And I think he's just got more buzz in the national media. I'm not saying I think he's actually better than Rising. I think that's arguable. I mean, we saw 3 really bad years of Bo Nix before we saw 1 good year. But nonetheless, I just feel like he's gotten more hype so far. So where are you at on these 3 guys?
To your point, Nix, I forgot to mention 510 rushing yards and 14 rushing touchdowns last year. Definitely a big part of his CFF output last year was his 14 rushing touchdowns. But yeah, I like where you have these guys. I think Jordan James is probably RB4 on the Devy list, maybe RB5.
Okay, I didn't want to be too aggressive, but yeah, I'm putting those guys ahead of everyone after Frank Gore, really. I just maybe like a C. Bangura, Samson Evans really has some kind of
or Ali. But yeah, I think I would rather have Jordan James than like Dubar.
Yeah. I honestly, I'd put them right there. I just didn't want to. I wasn't sure where you were going to be at on them. And I think Dowdle. I mean, it just depends on your tolerance with freshmen, really.
Mm-hmm.
But I think on pedigree, I think he belongs here with James. Maybe a couple of spots lower, just because he hasn't gotten on the field yet. But. I mean, pedigree-wise, I think that's where he goes. And what's Terrence Ferguson, right?
Yeah.
Ferguson, tight end 3.
I think that's fair. I think both the transfer wide receivers deserve to be ranked on the Devy side. I like Tez Johnson more, but he's 5'8".
I don't think he's got too much depth.
He's the P5 version of Ashton Hawkins.
What's the difference between him and Gary Bryant? Gary Bryant's more highly recruited. I guess Tez has done more, but he did more.
Tez has done more, and he has more hype in terms of spring and.
My problem with these guys is it could just as easily be Holden, or it could just as easily be the kid that was there last year. So, like, what the hell do you do with him for CFF? Can Bo Nix support 2 like good wide receivers? I guess Thornton's out, but Dickey's the only guy.
Thornton had 17 receptions last year.
I know, that's what I'm saying, but I just really the wide receiver 2 there was the other kid. I don't think he even named
Chris Hudson.
Yeah, Hudson.
Yeah, it really seems like Hudson and Coda are both taking a back seat, and they combined for near to 80 receptions. So. Or 90, they combined for 90. I don't know how to do math. 80 receptions. So, like, I don't know if Holden or Johnson were to break out and really take over one of the, like, a more significant part of that share, I could see him getting 58 receptions.
How do you rank them? I mean, I
would rank Holden above Johnson and Devy. I would rank
Holden's a knucklehead, though. He got in a ton of trouble with
Alabama. It's true, but he's talented.
He is talented. He got on the field ahead of a bunch of guys at Alabama.
Yeah,
is the relevant thing.
Above Burgess, because Corley's getting drafted, Clark's getting drafted.
Yeah. I think that's fair. Honestly, and he's the kind of guy, like, if he blows up this year, he could be a round 4 pick, round 3 pick. I kind of with you where I think Tez probably gets the work. Although I see, I see Holden as kind of like a well-rounded guy that can do a little bit of everything, but he's not going to really, like, I don't think he's going to take too much X work from Franklin. So it's like they're all vying for slot, and I think Tez is really good as a slot receiver. He does that he's got that always open, agile guy thing that coordinators love. So yeah, I mean, I guess for CFF, I'd probably put Tez above everyone, and then I mean, Jurian Dickey. Where do you want to put Dickey? He's awesome. I mean, he's obviously.
Oh, I think you're absolutely right for Devy, wide receiver too.
Yeah, Brian Franklin.
Yeah, forgot to mention him, but Jurian Dickey, high 4-star wide receiver.
The physical comp is AJ Brown.
Yeah, for me, he's like wide receiver 4 in this class, wide receiver 5 maybe. So definitely Devy wide receiver 2 among the group that we have ranked.
So you throw in Tez in CFF or not? I mean, I don't.
Oh,
frankly,
yeah, I think like above like Tyrone Howell.
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
Part of this is just, all my Tez Johnson shares really need to be good.
I've got a couple, although he's on the board in these supplementals, and I haven't been targeting him because, frankly, I'd rather draft like Ricky White, you know what I mean? A Trayvon Rudolph, and you can get those guys in the supplementals. Or random 4-stars, honestly, that I think have,
a better Devy chance.
Yeah, that have a better Devy chance. Yeah, exactly.
Because they're, 6 feet tall.
Yeah, and whatever, and have height coming out of high school. Could be a wide receiver 1 for a team on a P5 team. All right, is that it for Oregon? Did we miss anything? Oh, Bucky, you cool with him there? I mean, I think it's.
There's not really many players I can argue above him.
Right. I mean, Gore maybe, but I think Gore's slow. Right. I think that's the problem.
I think it's hard to justify right now because obviously, Irving's the RB1, James is the RB3, but I think I'd rather have James than just pure Devy because he profiles as an NFL back, and Irving is so small.
I don't know though. I mean, freaking A-Chain just got drafted. Irving is legitimately fast, probably not 4.32 fast like A-Chain, but James Cook, Irving's done more in college than James Cook did. Why can't he get drafted?
Yeah.
And I just said his tape's good, and he's really productive. I mean, over 1,000 yards in a timeshare. The other kid, I don't think we really need Whittington. I don't think we really need to talk about. I mean, I think he's a good college back, but if he needs Irving.
We should rank him on CFF.
Yeah,
even as a 2, he's worth something more than
I'm not taking him over
safer than Sean Dollars.
That's where I'm interested. Kyrie Robinson,
Keyshawn King.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. Anyone in that range, I just don't give an F about. I wouldn't put him over Cooley though, because I think Cooley's got serious upside.
Yeah, it's just kind of like a safety thing. Whittington's gonna have points. These guys below him, they could.
A 10-point per game guy is just a roster clogger in CFF though, and we could spend an episode talking about that. But all right, my next school is Colorado. Really freaking exciting. Obviously, if you've been living under a rock, Deion Sanders is now the coach. Colorado, massive exodus. Everybody that played for them last year left, either because they didn't want to be part of the circus or they just knew they were going to get replaced. The biggest thing to talk about is probably his son, Shader Sanders. Is going to be the QB1 there, and apparently looked awesome in the spring game. Put up serious stats in the spring game, a high completion percentage, 70 plus, 300 yards, a few tutties. Just looked the part. Everyone said, maybe they're trying to get up Deion's skirt, but all the beats said that, Shader looked the part of a P5 guy. He's got some NFL draft hype. I mean, he's Deion Sanders' kid. He could be bad and still get draft hype, but there's a realm where it's legitimate and he's actually, able to play football at that level. That's not outside of the feasible. So I think he's a guy you got to know. And then after that, I mean, if Shader's good, Colorado's offense is going to be good, probably, right? But after that,
in terms of coaching, they brought in the former Kent State head coach to take a downgrade to be the OC at Colorado. Obviously, Kent State had some huge success with Dustin Crum and Colin Schlee, Devontae Walker, Isaiah McCoy, like all kinds of CFF studs. So if that works in the Pac-12, then we could definitely see this offense being something.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's more likely than not that there's going to be some serious value from Colorado. But like we said, it's kind of wide open. I mean, the only other name that people talk about and that gets drafted early in supplementals is Travis Hunter, who played some wide receiver in the spring game, scored a couple of touchdowns or scored a touchdown, and then switched over to DB where he locked down all the other wide receivers. And that's like what we know about him. What we know about Travis Hunter is that if he played wide receiver, he'd be an early round NFL wide receiver.
And if he plays corner, he's probably a top 10 pick.
He's probably playing corner. You know what I mean? So does he play enough wide receiver to give you value in CFF? I mean, it's worth taking a shot, right? But I can't say I'm playing full-time two-way because he's just putting himself out to get hurt. And I can't see him wanting to play a ton of wide receiver snaps because he probably makes more money as a cornerback in the NFL. So I have not drafted any Travis Hunter in my supplementals. I will let someone else have a roster clogger.
I sort of agree.
He goes early.
Yeah, that's the issue. The value isn't there. Like in a vacuum, if I could have Travis Hunter in the last round, I'd probably take him. But
yeah, right. So after Travis Hunter, the wide receiver room is just like a mess of transfers. Everyone that was in transferred out, and there was some names there that were kind of interesting. Jordan Tyson, we'll talk about when we talk about Arizona, but he was good. He was by all my standards, breakout as a true freshman last year. So he's a guy that I'm interested in. And then Montan's Lamonius Craig. I'm probably butchering that, but
Montana.
Montana. You had a typo typing it in. He got a ton of hype. He was the guy the beats were glowing about in the spring game primarily.
He had like 3 touchdowns, I think.
Yeah. On big plays, right?
But like the week after he went to the portal.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, putting on a showcase for the portal.
Yeah,
he's probably
put on the showcase on ESPN, going in the portal, going to Arizona.
God bless him. Probably a smart thing to do, right? So the other guy that got spring game hype was Caleb Mathis, who was a true freshman, and he's not their most highly ranked true freshman. Omarion Miller is their most highly ranked true freshman. He's got hype behind him. He's got great pedigree. He was a dominant player in high school. So I think one of those guys is going to be a guy you want to own. Both of them go undrafted in supplementals. I think this is the kind of guy that I think is an awesome 15th round pick. Like, what are you taking? Like your wide receiver 10, like do you need another depth option at wide receiver? So I kind of do the inverse this year of what a lot of people do, where they just smash Devy early. I smash Devy for 2 rounds, 3 rounds, and then I take CFF guys and I kind of pivot back to my Devy guys at the end. So there's other names though to talk about, and this is why it's a mess, right? I mean, if there was just 2 guys and it was going to be one of them and we could draft them both, we'd be stoked, but that's not the issue here. So 2 guys transfer from South Florida, both who are productive there, Xavier Weaver, Jimmy Horn. Jimmy Horn transferred first, got a ton of hype, didn't play in the spring game. Horn's a little guy. He's a slot receiver. He is not a Devy guy, but if he's the wide receiver 1 there, he might smash for CFF.
I think Jimmy Horn's a Devy guy.
You do? Dude, he's like 170 pounds.
Who's his dad?
Oh, yeah. Well, his dad was a DB, right?
Yeah, but still, he's like very famous.
That's true.
Yeah.
Anyways, so Xavier Weaver actually outproduced him every year at South Florida. So, and if we were talking about, as we were winding up here, Kyle and I kind of went through the history of wide receivers in that Kent State system, and it was often the X receiver that really was the guy that produced. So my best bet right now, I think it's Weaver, is probably the guy you want to own, and then maybe grab a 4-star behind him. But Weaver at South Florida was worth about 18 points a game, went for 718 yards, 6 touchdowns last year. Horn was good too. Horn went for like 550 or something. I don't know. Maybe Horn was dinged up and he's actually a better player, but these guys are worth a shot and you don't have to overpay that much. but they are owned by a lot of teams already. So I just took Horn in like the 4th or 5th round of a supplemental. Maybe it was the 6th. Weaver's still on the board. I might grab Weaver, but I'm probably going to take like Omari and Miller later and then be done with Colorado. Running back of Colorado also could be a mess, but we know at least Alton Catskill, who was phenomenal at Houston before he got hurt. It transferred in there. He's probably the RB1 as long as he's recovered from his knee injury. And McCaskill is a guy that we had Devy hopes for. I mean, he was that good in his first year as the starter in Houston. And I think he's like of adequate size for the NFL.
6'1", 215.
Yeah, 215. So, yeah, he's kind of prototypical size. I don't love 6'1", but at 215, it's fine. I mean, that's Zach Charbonnet, right? So really interested to see what he does here. He's a guy that could go back on Devy radars if he just smashes. The other name to know, in my opinion, and this was a guy that Kyle tossed up here too, is Dylan Edwards. He's the RB11 in this incoming class, 5'8", 160, more of a Tariq Cohen kind of satellite-y kind of guy, but we've seen those guys be really good to use for CFF. We've seen some of those guys make it to the NFL. I was just arguing size doesn't matter. A-chain, yada, yada, 30 seconds ago. So, 160 is exceptionally small.
He's really fast.
He's really fast. He's legit fast. He's Devin A-chain fast. So, he's a guy that, yeah, sure. Could it happen? Why not? And certainly could be one of those just mega producer college guys if they're throwing in the ball. That's what I got in Colorado. Again, I think there's value there. I'm definitely taking some shots at this, but I don't think there's any locked in stone answer outside of Shade or Sanders or who you want to draft there. I guess the one other guy that I kind of missed was is it Dallin Hoker transferred there?
No.
Yeah.
Colorado State.
Oh. I didn't write down anyone. Two tight ends transferred out of Colorado. They got no one there coming back. So
they do Traore for about a month.
Right. Yeah, man, that guy still wasn't on a team. That's nuts. What are you doing?
Yeah.
Dude? That's just not good. Not a good look. He's talented. I saw that he was trying to play.
He has to get a waiver play now, though. Yeah, that's the other thing. He wants to play wide receiver. And he has to get a waiver now because it's his third transfer before he graduated.
Yeah.
Or second transfer.
Although, I think he should really get the waiver and just be like, dude, that program was a mess. I couldn't be there. But, I don't know. I just don't know if he's a wide receiver. What's the draw for him? He's a wide receiver. He's Gadsden, right? He's around a Gadsden. You got to play big slot if you're lucky. You're not an X guy. You don't have releases like that. So, all right. Did you throw these guys on the sheet as I was pontificating?
I'm putting them on the Devy side. I haven't gotten to the CFF yet.
Yep. So I think CFF, I think Sanders is going to be pretty desirable. I put him at the end of that tier we were talking about, maybe above Casey Thompson. Not that I don't think Casey Thompson's going to smash, but I think Sanders was great at FCS and was great in the spring game. He's got weapons, so I think he's going to be good. And honestly, if you're Deion Sanders, you're going to give this kid every opportunity to freaking go off because he wants to get him drafted in the first 3 rounds. It could happen. Sanders kind of feels like that guy to me that I'm ignoring a little bit that I shouldn't be ignoring as a Devy guy, honestly.
It's just it's if it was anybody else, we'd be like, can they make the jump from FCS to the P5?
Right. And that's my first instinct. I'm like, why do I care? Just because he's Deion's kid, but I just feel like I might be sleeping on him a little bit much.
If he wasn't Deion's kid, he's Cameron Ward, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah, exactly. Really similar, honestly.
Yeah.
He threw 50 touchdowns.
He moves up with his head coach.
Yeah.
To the Pac-12.
Yeah, that's funny. Which Ward did get a good amount of hype too. So
yeah, absolutely.
So I don't know where to put the wide receivers for CFF, really. I mean, I think it's Weaver, right? I think me and
Yeah, if
Jordan-
you feel strongly about one, I think they'll be good. Top 20, well, top 30 at least, top 20 if they really break out.
I mean, Trayvon Rudolph, or Xavier Weaver.
If it's a pass-first offense, I want Weaver. Like, Rudolph's good, but
Jared Brown or Weaver?
in just this year, I think Weaver.
So we'll put him above Rudolph.
I think that's fair.
I think that's aggressive, but I think they could.
Yeah, it is. But if one of these guys, it's really like Colorado wide receiver 1 deserves to be there. Right. We just don't know who.
And we'll put Jimmy Horn maybe right below right, a few later. What about Hunter?
What's that?
What about Hunter? You doing anything with Hunter?
Oh.
I feel like it's fair just not to rank him, honestly, because, like, what do you... Like,
yeah. I think we're both in the same boat of just letting somebody else deal with that.
Yeah. All right. So I'm cool. We'll leave him off our board.
We can put him on our Devy cornerbacks for IDP.
Yeah. Catskill, did you rank?
Yeah, I put him right below Jordan James. I think that's fair for Devy. But what do you do with him at CFF?
CFF, I think I'm taking him.
If we get like 2020 out in McCaskill, I think he's, top 20 at least. But do we?
I'd probably take. I'd probably rather have Tylan Hines in CFF. You? Where are you at on that?
Yeah.
But I think that's their range. Eldridge has big question marks. Vidal is a jag. So I'd put him above those guys.
It's a jag with carries.
Yeah. But, I mean, the Catskills, at least a jag plus, if not better, and he could be in a better offense. So, all right. Back to you, my friend. What do you got?
Washington State. No, Washington. Washington State. Yes. Gosh, so many freaking schools. They're all the same. Actually, Washington State is incredible, and they're my favorite team in the Pac-12. So, Cameron Ward, once again returning as a starting quarterback, just transferred up last year from the FCS from Incarnate Word. His his head coach at Incarnate Word, Erik Morris, moved up with him to be the offensive coordinator at Washington State. However, he has taken the head coaching job at North Texas. So Washington State brings in a new offensive coordinator, and that is Ben Arbuckle. Ben Arbuckle was the Western Kentucky offensive coordinator last year. He was the WKU's quality control offensive coach in 2021. So he worked under Zach Kittley last year, moved on to be Western Kentucky's new Zach Kittley last year. And if you've been following CFF for the last 2 years, you know that Zach Kittley offense has been incredible for CFF, for the quarterbacks, for the wide receivers, especially the slot wide receiver. Running backs, not so much, but we need to look at the quarterbacks and wide receivers, because last year, at Western Kentucky with Ben Arbuckle, Austin Reed was the QB4, averaged 28 points per game. If Cameron Ward has that kind of, with that amount of attempts and that amount of basically that amount of attempts, then we're looking at a quarterback who will probably finish pretty high in CFF, and a guy that many people were talking about with Devy value last year, so it could definitely come back into play. And then at running back, like I mentioned, though, the new coach probably going to put a damper on these guys, but they return Nakia Watson, the former Wisconsin running back who transferred in last year and led the team in rushing attempts and yards. And they return Jalen Jenkins, the rising sophomore who had a little bit of a breakout in his true freshman season, filled in admirably for when Watson went down for 2 games, and was pretty interesting to watch. So they only combined for 1,000 yards last year. I'd expect something similar this year. Not really 2 guys I'm super interested in. If one of them took over the backfield, it might be interesting. I think Jenkins has a skill to maybe do that, but the Beats don't seem to agree with me, at least for this year. But maybe in 2024, we're looking at Jalen Jenkins, Washington State RB1. And then moving on to wide receivers, and this is a team that basically returns nobody. I believe Renard Bell is out of eligibility. I think maybe the same with Lincoln Victor. Deshaun Stribling transferred out, went to Oklahoma State. Donovan Ollie transferred out to Cincinnati. So Jake Dickert looked at his roster, said, we have nobody at wide receiver, and brought in a bunch of transfers. The highest rated of these transfers was Kyle Williams from UNLV. Josh Kelly came in from Fresno State. Isaiah Hamilton came in from San Jose State. And then D.T. Sheffield comes in from Northwest Mississippi Community College. And he's been the one who, with all the hype from the Beats, supposedly in that slot role, in that Malachi Corley role that Ben Arbuckle used so well last year. And Sheffield's the one with the hype, and very well could be a very productive CFF wide receiver. Other than Sheffield, Josh Kelly seems to be getting the second most amount of hype. He's more of a bigger wide receiver. He won't be in the slot at all. He'll be the outside wide receiver. Probably catch some touchdowns, but won't have that type of volume that a guy in the slot might have. And then tight end's pretty irrelevant. They're not going to use one, most likely. But I think the players to definitely watch are Cameron Ward and D.T. Sheffield.
How high on D.T. Sheffield can you get for CFF? I feel like he could be a top 10 guy, or you could be wrong and it could be Kyle Williams and he could be a top 40 guy.
I mean all signs point to it being Sheffield right now.
Sheffield or Luke McCaffrey?
Sheffield.
So you're putting him above Luke McCaffrey, above Troy Franklin, and above Sam Wiglitz. For
just pure CFF, yeah.
Yes. All right.
That role in that offense is so freaking productive. Yeah. If it's truly him and just him, like all the Beats tend to think it is, then it's worth it.
Do we care about any of them at all for Devy? Obviously
Cameron
not
Ward.
Ward we do, but the wide receivers, not right. Nakia Watson, maybe like a last, like a UDFA type guy. So Nakia Watson was productive last year for CFF. I threw him on the list, but I threw him in slowish. I put him behind Quentin Cooley, ahead of Noah Whittington. He was like a good point per game guy, but I think it was just all touchdowns. He scored a shit ton of touchdowns.
Yeah, 13 touchdowns in 11 games last year.
That'll do it. Yeah.
30 receptions as well really helps in PPR.
That's nice. In 11 games, it's nice.
Yeah.
Are you cool with him there, or do you want to move him higher or lower?
I think that's all right.
All right.
Yeah. Him and Whittington, I think, will have similar lines. It's just going to be touchdowns between the two.
Yeah. And then for Devy, I could see these 4 quarterbacks reshuffling in literally any order. I could see Cameron Ward going off and becoming a day one guy, or he could be, a 6th round pick and flame out of the league in a year. So I'm only confident that those guys are pretty much where they should be at the top, except you could see like a Pratt or a Stone go off and, really, really rise above them. But I think we got to go with what we know right now on this. So, all right. I got those guys ranked and launched to my next team, which looks to be UCLA. Always a favorite of mine. I feel like they're perennially underlooked by the CTC guys because they're just overshadowed by USC and the SEC guys. But last year, had a bit of a coming out party for CFF with Charbonnet absolutely going nuclear, with DTR being, quite a tidy asset to be holding, 645 yards on the ground. And many will say that Chip Kelly often can produce that kind of performance.
Yeah, Chip Kelly's gonna succeed in offensive play calling at the college level.
Yeah, exactly. And as long as I've been playing CFF, there hasn't really been a wide receiver I gave crap out there. I mean, Bobo last year was like occasionally useful. I don't remember there being anyone the year before that. None of the 4 stars that have landed there since I've been doing C2C have been okay. They've either transferred or they've struggled to get on the field, which I don't know if that's a Chip Kelly thing, that he's slow to play the youngsters. But so it looks like their quarterback to start the year is going to be Ethan Garbers, who's bounced around a little bit. He was a 4-star quarterback, landed in Washington, and then transferred out before the season last year to UCLA. I don't know. I mean, Garbers can move around a little bit. He's probably not anyone I care about for either side, particularly. Maybe palatable for CFF. I do think he's got good weapons this year. I think a lot better than what DTR had to throw to, and I'm a little bit excited about that. So I guess I'll just skip around a little bit and talk about the wide receivers. They got one of my favorite guys in the transfer portal. I know you're a fan too. I think you actually got me onto him. That's J. Michael Sturdivant, who is a good 4-star with pedigree, landed at Cal, and just the counting stats weren't crazy last year, but he was in one of the worst offenses in football with just like horrendous quarterback play, and just made play after play. Went for 65 catches, 755 yards, 7 touchdowns, and he is fast. I mean, he's legit. Like, yeah, he's prototypical early round NFL wide receiver athleticism. And I think I've seen enough on film to think that I can get there for him. So fair to say I've acquired Sturdivant in every league I could last year. That he wasn't owned already. And honestly, I think he could be in for a blow up. Although Garbers doesn't inspire confidence in me, the system I think is a decent one. And then, of course, there is a world where Garbers does not excite, and we see Dante Moore before the end of the season. And obviously, true freshman quarterback's always a tough stop, but Dante Moore is an undeniable talent. I wish honestly Dante Moore was a year ahead, because I think year 2 Dante Moore and J. Michael Sturdivant is a 1,200-yard combination. But I also don't want to see Sturdivant come back for his senior year. I want to see him go to the NFL as a junior. So I think there's a lot to be excited about there. I think there's a couple other names worth talking about. Wide receiver Kyle Ford, who was a 5-star at USC, transferred to UCLA, got on the field, flashed a few times, but has never been able to stay healthy or put it together. I feel like it might be too late for him, and maybe the injuries have sapped the talent that made him a 5-star in the first place. But you never know. I mean, we're hyping up Brew McCoy in Tennessee, so why not Kyle Ford, UCLA? And then there were some interesting names that came out of the spring game. Braden Pegan? I've never heard the name said. I assume it's Pegan. He's a redshirt freshman. He was mentioned over and over again by the beats. He was 6'4", 195. He's probably playing behind Sturdivant, but was apparently great in the spring game. It's been great in spring practices. Maybe he gets the field in other positions. More likely, he's the successor to Sturdivant at that position. And if he's the starting X in this offense and they use the X, then he's going to be a guy that's really interesting for 2024. I don't think you have to draft him. I think he's maybe a guy to pick off waivers if you're in an open waivers league towards the end of the season. And then Cam Brown was a redshirt senior who, seems to get a little bit of spring hype every year. Is probably the starting Z. If you're looking for a second option in the offense, probably him. I don't know if I care. I mean, I feel like Bobo was their Z last year, and he was really good. I could be wrong about that, but I don't think he was playing at X. So it could be something there. And then they had a couple of freshmen They got the wide receiver 45 coming in from Matter Day. Always like paying attention to the Matter Day guys because if they get on the field there, they're probably better than a lot of higher ranked recruits from other schools. And 6'2", 195. He's got a little bit of hype so far. And then there's also this kid, Grant Gray, who is a wide receiver 53 that's actually gotten more spring hype. So I don't know that you have to draft these guys, but there's certainly people you should be watch listing. And I don't hate the idea of throwing McClure or a Gray on the end of your bench in the last round of your supplemental. I think it's probably smart because you know what? Dante Moore is a good freaking quarterback. He's going to sling it next year, and someone's going to be on the receiving end of that, and that person's going to be someone you want to roster. The other guy that I have to talk about here is Moliki Matavo, who got on the field as a true freshman at Oregon as a tight end, but just has been overshadowed by Ferguson, who came in the same class and has played a little better. We know that in prior years, Chip Kelly smashed the tight end position. I mean, Greg Dulcich, right, was phenomenal there. Was a top 10 CFF tight end, and then obviously parlayed that into early round NFL draft capital. Matavo, I think, is a talented kid. I think he was slowed down by an injury a little bit earlier in his career. So who's to say that he can't be the next, featured, tight end, big slot guy in Chip Kelly's offense? Again, you don't have to draft him. He's certainly a guy that's going to be there on waivers in pretty much every league. He's definitely a name to know because if he starts getting hype in fall practices, then, I want Chip Kelly's tight end if he's going to use the position. So the only guys out here that didn't talk about are probably two of my favorite guys to actually be targeting supplementals. And the main name is TJ Harden. I wanted Carson Steele to be a thing. 1,500 yards last year, tackle breaking machine, great hair. What's not to like? It's like out of like a Norse Viking film. And yet it seems like TJ Harden, who's kind of the incumbent, Zach Charbonnet's backup from last year, has held him off. And, it sounds like the kid's talented. Ran for 7.4 yards an attempt last year. He's got decent size. I'm all in on TJ Harden because whoever is the lead role is probably going to get featured. I doubt Carson Steele overtakes him between now and September. It's someone there's going to put up massive points. So disappointing because I own many shares of Steele. And in early supplementals, I was hammering him, and that looks like that was a foolish thing to do. But nonetheless, one of those guys is going to be sexy as hell to own. What do you got on UCLA, Kyle? Anything?
My hot take for UCLA, lukewarm take even. Dante Moore starts week 1.
That's interesting. I'd love that for Sturdivant, man.
Yeah, I don't think Garbers or Schlee is really anything in comparison to Moore. Yeah, I don't know. I think Dante Moore is a lot better than both those guys right now, or his ceiling is a lot better, and I think he's slightly better right now. So I think Moore starts week 1, if not week 4.
Yeah, I like all your ranks here, honestly. I could argue Sturdivant above Dickey just because he's done more. Dickey could not even get on the field this year, and Sturdivant could get drafted this year.
Sure.
But, if I'm staring down that choice at 201 in a supplemental, that's a tough choice. They're right there. Like Dickey's kind of like the last guy I take before I start taking the vets. And even then, I've taken Singer over him. I like Sturdivant more than Singer. I could argue both sides of that, but I think it's fine either way of the ranking. I certainly think if you want Dickey, you got to take him there. You ain't going to hang around to 208. Sturdivant could if he was available, though I really haven't seen him available in any supplementals. I think he either got drafted enough as a freshman or we hyped him up enough last year that he.
He definitely had some hype as a freshman, and just because of the size speed combo.
Yeah. All right. I like where you have all these guys. I got nothing to argue about here. TJ Harden could smash if he's the clear one. But this is LaDamian Webb. Yeah. As Kai Thomas is the name that sticks out. I think.
Yeah.
I'd take
Thomas
Harden.
Is like, we're assuming he's the one, but do we really have any proof?
Right. And well,
And like, if
sucks.
he's the one, he's probably really good.
Yeah. Yeah, but he could just suck too. He could just not be a great running back,
It's
So,
true.
anyways,
It's absolutely true.
I take both of those guys in supplementals, but I take Harden 10 rounds earlier.
I think that has a lot to do with the Devy side, though.
True.
I mean, one's going to start a P5 program, one's going to start at Kent State.
One's bounced on his third school already.
Yeah.
And didn't start last year at P5 or didn't hold this job anyways, right? So, all right, cool. Let's keep it firing here on all cylinders. What do you got?
I have Oregon State. Oregon State went 10-3 last season without really much on offense, surprisingly. So like an all-around good team. I mean, well coached last year, but the offense didn't produce fantasy points at a rate that you would expect from a 10-3 team. The real stars of the offense last year were the running backs. Damien Martinez led the way with 161 carries, turned that into 982 yards and 7 touchdowns. Deshaun Fenwick was the RB1B with 114 attempts and 3 less games than Martinez. Was not as effective as Martinez, only turned that into 553 rushing yards, but also scored 7 touchdowns. Jamius Griffin also put up close to 500 yards and 4 touchdowns last year. And all those guys, none of them were really important in the passing game. So one-sided running backs with, sub 1,000 yards, sub 10 touchdowns. They're all right for CFF, but they're not really special. Martinez and Fenwick, to an extent, probably have some skill. Could maybe make the NFL, but probably not in this offense. The wide receiver room is pretty ugly. They have Anthony Gold is probably their best returning wide receiver. 27 receptions for 457 yards and 3 touchdowns last year. He's a 5th-year senior now, but he is a legitimately good punt returner, but he's mostly that. Not really the wide receiver type. So not many names I'm looking at really get me excited in terms of playmakers. And that's not very helpful for their quarterback situation. And their quarterback situation boasts a former Devy QB1 in DJ Uiagalelei, transferring in from Clemson, going to Oregon State. Lost his job to Cade Klubnik at the end of last season. And he lost his job because he was one of the worst quarterbacks in the NCAA in terms of efficiency. He was able to keep Clemson afloat for most games, but Clemson was so much more talented than every other team in the ACC.
The defense,
Yeah. So I'm not excited about the Oregon State offense in any way. It'd be great to see the DJU, return and just like this incredible
little Bo Nix.
Little Bo Nix action, but I don't think there's anything there that excites me.
He just crosses the field so fucking slow, man.
Yeah. He statistically, analytically, one of the worst seasons ever last year when you really dig into the numbers.
Will Shipley saved his bacon. Just hand it to Will Shipley 30 times and you'll probably win.
Or throw it to Will Shipley behind the line of scrimmage. I mean, that's where half his passing yards came from.
Yeah,
he made an offense with Antonio Williams, Adam Randall, Bo Collins, a ton of guys that we like at wide receiver do nothing. And Cade Klubnik comes in and they suddenly are 300 year passing game. It's pretty obvious that DJ was the problem with Clemson. I don't think he'll elevate Oregon State. He hasn't even won the job yet. Ben Gulbranson is still fighting for it.
Oh no, I didn't hear that.
Yeah,
Gulbranson's
Gulbranson's bad. Gulbranson last year, 62.4% completion percentage, 9 touchdowns and 9 starts, 5 interceptions.
That's rough. All right, assuming DJU gets the job, are you ranking him for CFF? Because he runs at least a little bit, but I'm not putting him anywhere. I mean, I'm probably not drafting him, right? I don't think he usually goes drafted in these leagues. So
he's probably rostered. somebody probably has him and is sunk cost fallacy themselves into keeping him. And yeah.
I think if someone was doing a startup, I'd have him in that like Braylon Braxton range, right? Like I'd rather have Mikey Keene from Fresno.
I'd rather have Cole Snyder than DJU.
Harsh words, Kyle. I'm gonna have to copy and paste DJ Ukulele from somewhere. Whatever. We'll just call him BJU. We'll fill that in later.
BJU.
So I like Damien Martinez. It seems like more than you. I mean, he's got requisite size. He broke out as a true freshman ahead of some other guys that weren't like world beaters, but were veterans, had moved around, some portal guys. I think we'll find out this year who he is. But I'm looking at him like he's a Devy asset and desirable one at this point. Not like, a top 20 guy, but I'd rather have him for Devy than Frank Gore.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, he's a P5 starter.
Martinez is tough because he's actually like the size of an NFL back, and Bucky Irving isn't. So would you rather have him ahead of Irving?
I could go either way. I'll let you choose.
I'm going to put him ahead of Irving just because of the profile, honestly. If Damien Martinez does well this year and Bucky Irving does well, Damien Martinez will have more value, right? And then
and they could both have very similar seasons, except the issue is, in terms of CFF, at least the issue is that Irving will have 30 more receptions.
Exactly. So I put Irving one spot ahead for CFF, but and he's in that range. Ontario Brown, I could argue maybe you'd want ahead of Martinez, but Marlon Gunn, I don't know. I mean, Martinez could go for 1,000 easily this year. The kid that was like
if they can score more touchdowns, I can see it. And maybe if, but the other issue with touchdowns is that Fenwick is like 6'2", 230.
So you think he's the goal line back?
Yeah. They both had 7 touchdowns last year.
But Fenwick's coming in with 3 years of experience. Martinez was a true freshman. Martinez is going to seize the backfield this year. I'm not worried about Fenwick. I mean, yeah, sure. Like they could have a Stone Age coach and get locked into that paradigm. This guy's going to take all the goal line carries, but I don't see it playing out like that. But it could. You're right. It could. So
Jack Coletto last year had 27 carries and 6 touchdowns.
All right. Is there anyone else we care about here for CFF or Devy at all?
No. Oh, Aiden Chili's. In terms of freshmen, Aiden Chili's, the freshman quarterback headed over there. He's 6'4", 195, a true dual threat guy. Proved in the spring game that he's a playmaker. Ranked by 24/7 as a QB 12 in this freshman class. I think most of us in kind of the C2C community have him a tad higher, like QB 8, QB 9. So he's definitely a Devy guy. He won't start this year unless DJU really shits the bed. But
Chili's or Ward for Devy? Chili's or Ward?
I think Ward.
Yeah, that's where I have.
I think Chili's and Green is more of a question than Chili's and Ward. I'd probably take Chili's.
I take the upside. Do you rank him for CFF just as like CFF Dynasty? I mean, CFF Dynasty, I'm taking him pretty high.
Are we doing CFF Dynasty? I don't think we have been with a lot
Let's
of
just
them.
assume we're not. Assume it's seasonal.
Yeah.
So you don't need to really list him unless you think that Cole Branson and DJU are both bad enough that he takes over midseason.
I do think they're both bad. I'm not sure if they're bad enough.
We'll throw him in there in the Basilak, sub-Basilak range, Carter Bradley, just in case. But yeah, he doesn't get drafted in our best balls when we do the 40 rounds or whatever. So let me ask you this, Kyle. We're an hour and 10 minutes in, and we've done half the schools. Do you want to forage on, or should we split this like we kind of talked about splitting episodes? I don't care. I got nothing to do. It's Sunday afternoon, it's 6:15, but who's watching a 2-hour episode?
Yeah, we got through. We could also 7,
split them. We could record.
6.
We went through exactly 6. We could do the recording, split it, release 2 episodes, but it's a live stream. But I could chop it and release it as 2 separate episodes.
I think we call it.
All right, I'm totally happy with that. Also, I think there's a lot to talk about in what we have left. I mean,
Yeah, I mean
USC,
USC,
Arizona,
yeah,
BYU, Washington,
Washington.
all full of Devy talent. So yeah, I'm cool with that. Yeah, maybe reconvene in a couple of days or something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think we wrap this up, and well, so that's 6 of the Pac-12. Our next episode will be 6 of the Pac-12 and BYU,
And
because
BYU,
we needed somewhere to put them. But yeah, I think we did the quarterbacks. Well, I can't really say. I was going to say the quarterbacks in the Devy rankings surprised me a little bit, but they don't, because we just got to the P5, and the other comparisons are all G5 guys who aren't getting the cameras in front of them as much as these guys. So
yeah, like I said, there's some G5 guys that could take the leap. They could have a Malik Willis type rise there. I mean, obviously Pratt, Stone,
Green,
Warner, yeah, Green, all those guys could pull some limelight this year and get drafted at some point, get some hype, But I think we gotta be conservative until you see the national media start to hone in, or we just see a guy go nuclear. If Green starts throwing for 350 a game this year and running, yeah, we'll start talking about him as a legitimate NFL draft pick. Same thing with Pratt or Finn.
like
Finn
it will
starts.
probably happen, like it usually does, whether it's Willis or Ritter or whatever. But we just have no idea who.
Yeah, exactly. So slow play it for now. Those guys are all probably owned. I mean, Taylor Green didn't make it past the 5th or 6th round in any supplemental I've done. Pratt's been owned. Warner I took in the 8th round in every league. Finn got taken last year. So yeah, I mean, not a lot of ground to really dig into in the supplementals of those guys. But that's it. If you guys followed along with us so far, we appreciate your time and attention. As always, we hope this big board is a useful tool. It's up on my Patreon, or you could DM me or Kyle, and we will send you this. We're excited to share the tools we're building. I mean, I don't know you, Kyle, but I've been using this in all my supplementals, because even just the G5 guys were super helpful to have laid out, ranked, a place I can pull them off. I mean, it's so easy to let Jalen White slip through in a supplemental, right? Or a Frank Peasant. Those guys were unowned in a lot of leagues, and those are people that can help you win some money this year. So shoot us a line. We're happy to share the tools. That's why we're doing this. It's also up on the Patreon, my other big boards and stuff like that. And of course, if you followed along, please please subscribe. We need your support. We want to pump the YouTube numbers up to the point where we can do a little bit more with it than we are right now. But that's it. We're glad to have you. And Kyle, I'm glad to have you. I'm glad we were able to make some time today and get some recording done.
Yeah, happy to be here.
Yeah. Got any parting shots?
Cameron Rising QB4 next year.
What? That's psycho. You're a madman. It could happen. Why not? I feel like every year one of these guys that's been a steady Eddie starts to get the Desmond Ritter, right? Starts to get some hype. Yeah. Well, Wilson was more of he was a sexy, you know what I mean? Oh, a superstar talent. Whereas Cam Rising is just dude's a baller. Just smash his head against a brick wall a dozen times. It's going to help his team.
He goes to the Manning passing camp with all the other quarterbacks, and he wins the MVP. Something's there.
Yeah. All right. I appreciate it, man. We'll cut it loose for this one, but we'll see you guys next time. Enjoy the 4th.